Happy birthday, Linux. Today is the 34th anniversary of the announcement, not the release, but the announcement of the upcoming hobby project called Linux. Welcome back to Switch to Linux. If you like this type of content, please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. Leave us a like and a comment down below. And today I do want to talk a little bit about the Linux birthday and basically what this had meant to me going over the years. So a little bit more of the story background as I have transitioned to Linux over the last decade or so. And I really wanted to talk a little bit about this and why I switched to Linux. As you know, hopefully you know, within about 2 months, your Windows 10 will be end of life. You can either pay for a subscription to continue to receive security updates that, curiously, they're already doing. They're just holding them within you, unless you pay. Or you can give them a lot of data and sync stuff to their OneDrive account. Or you can just buy a new piece of hardware. Or, if you are capable to, you can upgrade your existing computer. However, it's been estimated up to 40% of computers running Windows 10 cannot run Windows 11. And this means a lot of e-waste. And we wanted to tell you here at Switch to Linux, there are alternatives that honestly most people can switch to a different operating system, Linux being the best of those operating systems. Not necessarily just because it's Linux, but you have looking at what you have available to you, and there are a number of different systems you can use. Your two primary ones, of course, are Windows and Mac. Both of those engage in degrees of spyware that I personally am not comfortable with. Both of those are big corporates which try to, lock you into how they're doing things. They try and wall you into it. And that's what Microsoft has been doing with pushing these Microsoft accounts and syncing things to it and authenticating everything, because they really want to know exactly who is the user behind every computer interaction your system does. Apple takes a little bit more private approach, but they can still do a lot of the similar things. Their big problem is they keep you inside of their walled garden of their digital ecosystem. Mostly you have all your photos and all your videos and everything over there, your music, all tied into your Apple account. And if you try and get out of that Apple account, it's possible, but it is a lot of friction. And so both of those two systems, of course, do have some downsides. And one of the downsides of Apple, or one of the upsides, I should say, of Apple, is that they do support hardware a whole lot longer. And since their operating systems are designed for specific few pieces of hardware, they do a little bit better job. But let's go ahead and talk briefly about Linux. So Linux has the upside that you control everything in your computer. It has no spying in it for the most part. There's a few distros and a few applications that have been creeping their way in from time to time, but for the most part, you can still run Linux without any spying, without any data collection, and under your full control. You have a lot more control over what you do with your system. The downside is it is a little bit more of a learning curve, and depending on which distribution you are using, it might take a little bit of time to figure out how to get things working. Additionally, it is a different operating system, which means some of the applications you're using may not work. Now the question is, do you have to use that exact application, or can you find an alternative? There's an excellent site, alternative2.net, which you can type in pretty much any application in the world and find good alternatives. Things like Microsoft Office, there are so many good alternatives. You do not need Microsoft Office. Things like Adobe Suite projects, there are good replacements for some of them. There are a few that are a little bit harder to replace. But this brings us to those niche situations. If you are actually working in the digital arts and you have to use that Creative Cloud suite for your job, you're probably not going to make a switch to Linux very easily. But that does not describe the vast majority of people out there impacted by this Windows 10 end-of-life situation. All right, most of those people, you can switch to Linux. Oh, I use Photoshop from time to time. Use GIMP instead. All right, it does just as good of a job. It's just a little bit different. You got to learn how to use it, especially with the changes into the GIMP 3 that just released. It has brought a lot more of the features that were missing from GIMP into GIMP, layer properties being the primary one of those. And so there are alternatives that are going to be good for most people. There are obviously those few niche people that are usually loud in the comments. Well, I can't possibly switch because I'm not talking to you. That's fine. Or at least I'm not talking to you where it goes to work. Maybe you should consider another computer or just an external hard drive that you can install Linux on for all your personal stuff to keep your personal life separated from all of the big tech data collection, and then keep that Windows machine just for those basic work functions. That works too. But all that being said, Linux is 34 today in August of 25th. Linus Torvalds on August 25th, 1991. 21-year-old student. He announced that he was making a new operating system simply as a hobby. It's not going to be portable. It's going to have a very limited release. It's just things that I'm going to do for the fun of it, and I'm not really expecting it to go anywhere. Famous last words, it's right on par with the CEO of IBM saying there's like a world market of 3 computers. Yeah. Yeah, this hobby project turned into the thing that made the background infrastructure of the world work. And if you do not realize it, guys, most of you that are like, oh, I'm a Windows user, you're probably using Linux somewhere, baba. Whether any Android-based phone is all built on Linux. Many of your streaming boxes are based on Linux, or some webcams are based on Linux. Some of your car entertainment systems are based on Linux. And so Linux really has taken over, even the space station based on Linux. Go figure. But he started it out. Now, there is a difference. He did release the first version in September of that year. September 17th. So some people might say that's the official birthday when you could first download it for the first time. But the announcement was this. Maybe this is like the conception announcement, and the other one's the actual birthday. Biological terms, takes a while for the baby to bake in the oven. You know what I mean? And so this is what he wrote, though, on his announcement. He wrote, "Hello, everyone out there using Minix. I am doing a free operating system just as a hobby. It won't be big and professional like GNU." If only he knew. For 386, 486 AT clones. This has been the brewing since April, and it is starting to get ready. I'd like any feedback on things people like/dislike in the Minix, as my OS resembles it somewhat, like same physical layout of the file system due to practical reasons, and among other things. I've currently ported Bash 1.08 and GCC 1.40, and things seem to work. This implies I'll get something practical within a few months. I'd like to know what features most people would want. Any suggestions are welcome, but I won't promise I'll implement them. Linus. P.S. It's free of any Minix code, and it has a multiple-threaded file system. It is not portable, uses 386 task switching, etc., and will probably never support anything other than AT hard disks. That's all I have. So there is the original announcement. And of course, where did Linux go from there? Well, as it says down here, Android smartphones, Wi-Fi routers, smart assistants, smart fridges, big screen TVs, satellites, airplanes. Linux even powers the entire internet, world's top 500 supercomputers, Wall Street, and even the International Space Station are all running on Linux. All 34 years ago. How wonderful. Every year, people say this is the year of the Linux desktop. We who use Linux every single day know it has always been the year of the Linux desktop. Today marks 34 freaking awesome years of Linux. And that's really what is what we have. So just if you're new to Linux, I just kind of want to show you, Linux isn't some scary terminal or something. This is actually the Linux desktop we are recording the video on. I'm running a dual screen monitor. My actual recording monitor is OBS. It is on the other screen. There it is. See? There you see. So I'm running OBS over in the other screen. And so, we have full menus. It is well organized. By default, in fact, it organizes into a simple menu that you can use. You can search for things. There's FileZilla's there. You can search for, let's search for like GIMP. You can just kind of do anything. There is a software manager over here. I can install software. I can pin things to my favorites. And basically anything I can do on a basic computer, I can do over here. And it works nicely. Now, the cool thing about Linux is there are a number of different ways that you can implement the various ways of your using your operating or using your desktop. So I like working off my desktop. I keep all of the active files sitting there, and I like the file folders. I like kind of the mess, the chaos on my desktop. There are some people that don't like that approach, and there are desktop environments that do not even allow you to interact with the desktop at all. You put a pretty picture there, and it's the place that the pretty picture is there waiting for you to cover it over with Windows. There are, by Windows, I mean like browsers and file manager stuff, things like that. Effectively, you can do anything with your operating system, and the more you learn about it, the more control you can have. You can stylize it, any colors, any styles, any designs. You can create your own layouts. You can just do anything you want that works on Linux, and that is why it is totally awesome. Now, as far as how have I used Linux over the years, when I first switched to Linux, see, I wasn't one of these computer science geeks that just, I've been on bulletin boards ever since the internet could go. I wasn't one of those guys. In fact, fun tip, I'm not sure I've even mentioned on the channel before. I was actually in high school what you'd call a technophobe. In other words, I did not use any technology at all, even for classes that were like, oh, you can finally use a calculator. In my generation, you were not allowed to have a calculator in school. Now, of course, they give them to first graders, which is why we are incompetent at math, by the way. But we were not allowed to use calculators until like high school. We first get those TI-81 calculators, and it was a fun day in geometry class. We pulled those out and ran these programs and did cool things on the screens. Oh, whoa. And then we get into our more advanced classes like your physics or your chemistry, things like that. They're like, yeah, you should have a calculator. Well, I actually got the highest grade in our chemistry class without using a calculator at all. I did all the math up and down the margins of the paper. No wonder I went on to be a chemist, actually, before doing this YouTube thing. So there was that. And then from there, I went over into, I think I did trigonometry and pre-calculus. And they said, yeah, you have to have one of these TI calculators. Like, oh, Lordy. And we were from a poor family. So, my mother scraped together $100 to buy one of these calculators. And I said, I'm going to be darned if I'm going to use my mother's $100 to do nothing more than add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So I decided I'd sit down and I would learn TI basic programming language. And I sat down and I programmed several things from games to kind of advanced things. In fact, I did TI basic programming language in my honors credit for chemistry, where I did a TI basic program to solve equilibrium equations, KEQ equations in chemistry. So I did a lot of programming work, all self-taught. Well, right around that time, I'm doing the pre-calculus. I'm like, I should go to college, and I see computers are the wave of the future. Even though I'm not a huge fan of them, I better get a computer. So I scraped together all the money I had for my part-time job. I bought myself a computer, which Windows 95 at the time. And I get this, and I'm like, okay. And now I had a friend of mine who did grow up on all the bulletin boards and all these things, all this online stuff. And he's always like, but you have to understand, I'm a terminal academic geek. I said, well, I can learn programming. He's like, no, I bet you can't. 1 week later, I programmed some stuff in the basic programming language. I said, here's some basic programming stuff. He's like, shut up. Kind of bothered him a little bit. I got the highest grade in both computer science courses I was required to take for my major. They required computer science courses for chemistry for some reason. One of those was in Visual Basic. One of those was in C++. And if compilers weren't so stinking expensive, I might have changed my major to computers. Despite being a technophobe in high school, I was actually highly competent on technology, which is curious because when I was still a technophobe in 10th grade, they had us do those crazy assessment tests that we never put anything in. That thing said, you will be very skilled in technology. And I looked at that, and me and my friends looked at that, and we laughed. We laughed hard. Oh, Lord, those geeky academics were right. I was highly competent in technology. Who knew? But it did. But the point all being is I went off and I was a chemist. I was a biological scientist, and I taught chemistry at the college level. And then I decided that the academic world it was getting crazy and weird. And so I started a little web design company and started with that, left the university, and I was just happily plugging along doing web design work on my Windows 7 computer and happy about that and all these types of things. Eventually I bought a Mac so that I knew how to use both operating systems pretty well. I had one project was dedicated to Mac, and the other project I had was, everything else I had was running Windows. And then eventually I see this Windows 10 come down the pipeline, and I'm reading this TOS where they just want to collect a bunch of data and always on the internet and always sending up data up to them that you can't turn off. I'm like, no. But I've been using a Mac for a while, and I cannot get excited about Mac. What else is out there? Linux. I remember using Linux very briefly. I was working with an academic startup company out of Austin, Texas, and I had this computer at the time that was it was a compact computer with a really poor design. They actually screwed the hard drive directly onto the main chassis of the computer. If you slid it across the desk, it pushed enough force into the hard drive to break the platters. And so that thing went through 2 hard drives in like 3 months. I'm like, this is nonsense. So I start looking up, can I run Windows off of an external hard drive? And at that time you can't. You can now, at least at one point in time you could. But at that time you couldn't. But I find this little thing called Ubuntu. And so I download Ubuntu. It was like 13 maybe. And I download Ubuntu and I throw this onto the disk. I'm like, wow, this thing turns this computer into something that works. So I was able to use that computer to run my Salesforce instance and things while I was running the actual programs I was running with the clients over on the other computer. So I'm multi-geeking here. One of these was running Ubuntu. Now after I left that company, I didn't need the Ubuntu anymore, so I hadn't used it for a while. And then when this Windows 10 thing came around, I remember I have that Ubuntu disk floating around somewhere. Can't seem to find it. Is this still around? Oh, it is still around. Let's download it. And so I downloaded Ubuntu, and I put that on the third computer I had in my office. So now I'm running every day. I'm running a Windows 7 computer, an Ubuntu computer, and a Mac over here. And I did that in this transitionary time. And what I ended up doing is up until about 2 years, no, it was a year. I don't know, it was 1 or 2 years before I actually went on the road. I was still using the Windows 7, but I'm still also daily running the Ubuntu. And then at that point in time, I just don't like the UI of Ubuntu. So I'm trying to figure out how do I get a taskbar down at the bottom, things like this. And that's when I discovered Linux Mint, which was 100%. I saw it. I'm like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So I bought a new laptop, which was basically my replacement laptop in case my Windows 7 one died. And it was my laptop that I started transitioning my work from Windows, transitioning it over to Linux, throwing a few of my projects over there. So I'm always getting experience while still having the safety net of the Windows computer going on. And that computer ran Linux Mint. And that is actually the same operating system now I have carried over through multiple iterations up into a completely different laptop, cloning the drive and fixing it to work on the modern hardware. And so it's the same system that I have been running for a long time. But effectively now, of course, about a year before I went out on the road full-time, I transitioned from the Windows 7 computer to running my full-time web design business on a Raspberry Pi. And so I've been doing that now for 7 years. I've been running my web design business on a Raspberry Pi. So it was running Manjaro because 7 years ago, Manjaro was the most complete system. Everything worked. Now I'm actually running it on a Raspberry Pi 5 with the M2 hat with an SSD running MX Linux with the Cinnamon desktop environment. And I absolutely love that setup. It works. It's exactly what I need. I can do everything I need relating to web design on that particular system. And then I save these higher power ones for things like video production. And I still have, of course, a couple different laptops for things as well. And then I have an Arch Linux computer, which gets run for the general all-purpose, multi-purpose computing type stuff. Now, what other things have I gotten into since I've been playing around with Linux? Because it brought so much excitement and possibility. Well, the one thing I'm doing is one of our supporters graciously sent me a Fitlit PC and said, hey, this would be great for a router. And I'm still using old commercial routers. So now I'm running a router. Now, that's based on BSD. I'm running pfSense on that. There are full Linux-based versions of that now that I might use instead. It's just the pfSense router is working, and I'm not shaking the boat on that one. But it's based on FreeBSD, which is very, very close to Linux. And so I'm using that as my whole router. I have a full onboard media server and file server that easily gets shared between all of my systems, even here in the van. It only runs when I need it in the van. When I was in the house, it ran 24/7. Now I just need it, turn it on when I need it, or streaming movies or things. I have increase, like I think I have bought 3 or 4 times the movies I had back then, because it was exciting watching movies again, because of the way I can distribute movies to different systems simultaneously. It just everything I can do inside of Linux. It just brought a breath of fresh air into computing. And for the first time, Windows was getting stale because they kept on pulling out my ability to control it. They kept on pushing me in directions I didn't want to go. They kept on manipulating the core of the system such that I could no longer have any control over my system. And I switched to Linux going, I have full control again. This is incredible. So what started as a simple hobby project from Linus Torvalds announced 34 years ago today turned out being a system that my phones are now running custom. I'm running Graphene OS, full custom OS, that doesn't display me ads at all, doesn't collect any data at all, doesn't show anything that is objectionable to me. It is just a simple smartphone that does exactly what I need it to do, period. Nothing more, nothing less. And then I have this computer set up. I have I have servers. I'm running my own infrastructure for websites, things like that. So all of this came from just learning this thing about Linux because Windows decided to go a little nutsoids. It all started with one guy, Linus Torvalds, 34 years ago, says, yeah, I'm making a hobby project. It won't be anything big or professional like GNU. If only he knew 34 years ago. So happy birthday, Linux, and thank you, Linus Torvalds, for giving us such an amazing thing and keeping it with that dedicated open sourceness that gives us exactly what we need in order to actually maintain control of our computer systems. So that's what I had for you today. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'm going to give you guys to close out here, a comprehensive guide of Linux Mint in case you've not seen it before, just to see what this can do for you. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.